Hello everybody, it's Orishime here, and today's video is a review on the series Ojamajo Doremi. This series is really special to me, but before I get into the review, I would just want to put a few warnings because this is going to be a crazy video. So before the review, we have to get into a background of the show for you guys. What exactly is Ojamajo Doremi and why do I love this silly show so much? Ojamajo Doremi is a magical girl series created by Toei Animation, and it first aired in February 1999. It aired for 4 consecutive years with 4 seasons, kind of like how Precure runs nowadays. It also spawned its own movies and spin-off shows and movies. The story is about a little girl named Doremi. She's training to be a witch alongside her friends. It's a classic Japanese Sunday morning kids show. It aired every Sunday morning, much like Precure does nowadays. And the aim of the series was to create a show that could grow along with its audience. So every season would include the passage of a year, and her friends and Doremi would get a little bit older each time. The creator of Ojamajo Doremi is Izumi Todo. This is a familiar name for Precure fans, as you guessed it, it's the creator of Precure. The series composer is Takashi Yamada, also known under the pen name Midori Kuriyama. He's also accredited on writing Onegai My Melody, Jewel Pet the Movie, and Heartcatch Precure Movie. The character designer of the series is Yoshihiko Umakoshi. He's the most famous for designing Heartcatch Precure, but also has credits on My Hero Academia and Cowboy Bebop, and he's also animated on Dragon Ball. He first broke onto the character design scene in 1994 with Marmalade Boy. The music of the series is composed by Keiichi Oku, another alumni from Marmalade Boy. As I already mentioned, the series spans 4 seasons, but it also has light novels, OVAs, movies. But this review is just focusing on the main 4 seasons of the show and the OVA Nice Show, as that is considered a core part of the viewing. Internationally titled as Magical Doremi, many countries picked up dubs for the show, including 4Kids out in the West. It actually aired here on CITV when I was a kid. I don't remember watching it, but the name is really familiar. I kind of hazily remember the run, like I definitely remember seeing it listed in the TV guide every now and then, but it's not something I ever watched until recently. I actually watched the show in Japanese for the first time last summer, and it was a run. It was so gripping, I just couldn't stop watching. I finished the show, it has 200 odd episodes, and I finished it so fast. I have a lot of thoughts about the show, and it's taken me kind of all of this time to fully process it and get my thoughts in order. So this review today is me finally speaking about everything I love about this show. The story begins with Doremi. She's a pretty below average 8-year-old girl. There's absolutely nothing special about her. She gets bad grades at school, she doesn't get a boyfriend, and she kind of underachieves and is constantly outshined by her little 5-year-old sister Pop. With such bad luck and seemingly no special talents, Doremi gets real down on herself. She wishes she could use magic to make her life better. One day she stumbles across the Mahodo. This is a magic store owned by a witch. Doremi goes inside and meets the shop's owner, Majorika. As she realises Majorika is a witch, Majorika gets turned into a frog because of an ancient curse. Now that Majorika's a frog, the only way for her to turn back into a human is for her to take on a witch apprentice and raise them into a real witch. Upon passing the final witch exam, the witch apprentice will be able to turn their master back into a human. So this is Doremi's task. She must become a witch. This is great news for Doremi because she really wants to be a witch anyway. However, the problem is keeping it secret, and before long 2 of her friends are in on the secret, Aiko and Hazuki. They both become witches alongside Doremi to help restore Majorika to a human. They begin renovating the Mahodo and making it a more trendy store so that more people will come by and buy their magic wares. By selling the magic wares, they'll earn money to fund their witch training. Yeah, they need money for the witch training. Even witches aren't free from the cost of living crisis. Over the course of the show, the girls have to take part in magic exams. Every exam will move them up a grade, and the final exam will be the one that turns them into real witches. They must also juggle their daily lives at school and home and working the store alongside their witch training. This is a lot for some 8-year-olds to do. They mostly use their magic to either help their classmates or just solve everyday problems in their lives. And this adds a really interesting twist to the show because this isn't really something that's typical of magical girl shows nowadays. I think the magical girl genre is more known for the Monster of the Week style stories like Sailor Moon and Precure. Doremi being a more chill slice of life show where the magic is about everyday life and what you can do for the people around you is something I found really interesting. Over the run of the seasons, they also gain more witch apprentice friends. Doremi's little sister Pop gains in on it during season 1. In season 2, we meet Onpu, and in season 3, we meet Momoko. One of the subplots within season 1 is collecting the bad cards. These are evil spirits that take the form of magic cards and will fuse with objects to become unlucky charms known as bad objects. They're really creative names. These are an evil force from the wizarding world, and the Witch Queen assigns them to the Ojamajos to collect and purifies the cards. She gives them the title of the Pure Elaine. This is their new job. She also assigns them a magic laptop, and this laptop has a dark wizard named Oyajide trapped inside it. He's confined to this weird little yellow blob form. He's been turned into this as a punishment for losing the dark cards in the first place. He's able to sense the cards and objects, so he's going to be a valuable asset to the girls as they look for the objects. However, he's also a real pain. This bad card arc kind of helped create a bit of a Monster of the Week style effect in the show, considering it didn't really have one. The bad cards would often possess people around them or create really bad things, so this kind of added a bit more suspense and drama to the show. While I definitely believe Ojamajo Doremi's strongest point is the character work that it does, I think having a little bit of action in the Monster of the Week style isn't a bad thing either. Having a dark magical threat from time to time is actually really exciting. Season 1 ends with a really dramatic arc, which sees the girls trying to convince Onpu to stop using forbidden magic. Onpu is a child idol who's shown up sort of halfway through the series, and the girls really like her, but it turns out that she is also a witch apprentice, but she's training under Majorika's longtime rival. This causes a lot of discord among the girls. Onpu is also really rebellious and doesn't quite act the way that the witch apprentices are meant to. She constantly flaunts her forbidden magic and thinks she can keep getting away with it. However, the day finally comes where Onpu can't keep getting away with using the forbidden magic. She falls into a coma as a punishment for breaking the witch rules, and Doremi and her friends have to give up their witch crystals to bring her out of the coma. Upon giving up their witch crystals, this means that they are no longer witches. They've literally just passed their final exam and they've already given it up. So that means Majorika is still a frog, and the girls have to go back to grade 1. The show wasn't intended to end this way, but with its popularity, the staff had to renew it for another season. So they reset everything and brought in more seasons. The following seasons all have similar formulas to the first one. Each season sees the Mahodo being renovated into something that matches the theme of that season. For example, in season 2 it's a flower shop. In the finale of each season, the girls do gain their witch status but have to give it up. This is obviously to keep the show fresh and to keep renewing it. Over the seasons we learn more about the witch world, which is really interesting. The world building in the show is really good. We learn about the rift between the witches and wizards, and we learn about the rift between the witches and the human world. The divide between witches and humans is a really big focus in the show, and there's a lot of moral dilemma over, is this divide right? And are the witches doing the right thing? The two actually coexisted in the past, and the divide between the two worlds upsets Doremi. The second season introduces us to the concept of the wizards. The wizards are all considered the bad guys. The witches and the wizards had a fallout a long time ago. The witches sealed off the wizard world as a punishment. The wizards were all branded as bad people, with no exceptions. However, a team of wizards called the Flat Four are introduced to the human world. Initially, their goal is to be the bad guys and to steal baby Hannah, who is born that season. Their goal is to use Hannah's magic to revive the wizard world and become more powerful than the witches so they can take over. However, as the season progresses, the Flat Four become friends with Doremi and her friends and begin to develop feelings towards them. This leads to them becoming allies and everybody teaming up against the evil wizard in the end. Season 2 shook up the formula of Ojamajo Doremi a little bit. Onpu finally joining the team resolved their rift. Oyajide was released from his laptop prison and is now a human again. And the Flat Four have a really fun dynamic with the main characters. The biggest shake-up in Season 2 is Hannah, the little baby. She's a magical witch baby and she was born from a royal blue rose. As Doremi happened to witness her birth, she was assigned the role of Hannah's mother, and the gang are given the task to raise Hannah into a wonderful witch. The Mahodo is turned into a flower shop this season and the girls all work there selling flowers. They also received some fun new witch outfits. Something I really liked this season was the romance between Doremi and Akatsuki from the Flat Four. He seems like the perfect match for Doremi and he seems to finally break her streak of bad luck with boys. Until, of course, it's revealed that he's one of the bad guys. The Flat Four weren't really seen again after Season 2, which I think is a real shame because I really like them as characters and I think they added a lot to the show. I think there was also more potential to explore them as characters and to explore the wizard's world. Onpu finally becoming friend rather than antagonist is also a really great addition in this series, and it does a lot of service to her character. I found I kind of struggled to like her in season 1, but getting her more developed in season 2 and seeing things from her perspective more often really helped. While Hannah is really important in this season, I unfortunately just don't really enjoy the whole let's make little girls raise a baby trope that a lot of magical girl shows seem to do. However, I do respect the maturity that Ojamajo Doremi dealt with this story with. This series ends with Hannah being taken back to the magical world to be raised alongside the other magic babies. Season 3, titled Moto Ojamajo Doremi, finally introduces one of my favourite characters, Momoko. She's a transfer student from America and she is such a sweet girl. She's been given a second chance at being a witch apprentice after losing her magic crystal back in America. Because of the cultural differences between Japan and America, there's a lot of focus on Momoko struggling to fit in, and she is misunderstood by the other characters at times, coming across as rude when she's just trying to be herself. After Momoko's rocky start, she soon becomes a beloved friend and ally of the Ojamajos. She also helps them at the Mahodo, which is now a bakery. This is my favourite version of the Mahodo. It's so sweet, and look at the little play sets, and just look at it, it's so Ghibli-esque. I think this is just so good. Moto Ojamajo Doremi also has one of the best theme songs in the series, I think. Like, it's Eurobeat, come on! This season is where things definitely start getting a lot more lore heavy, and there's also a lot more plot to this season than the previous ones. It goes really hard on the history of the magic world, introducing the previous queen who had become evil and cursed the witches, and exploring a lot of the strifes of the witches. This season reveals that the reason witches turn into magic frogs when they're exposed is because of the previous queen of the witches. After getting her heart broken and losing her family, she put a curse upon the witches. The final season, titled Ojamajo Doremi Dokkan, brings Hannah back to the human world, this time as a girl the same age as Doremi. She gets sick of being a baby and magically ages herself up so she can go to school with the gang. However, acting her new age is a lot harder than she expects and she gets into a lot of trouble. Once again, the girls find themselves juggling with helping Hannah fit in and learn how to do school and running the shop. This time it's a craft store. At the craft store, they make handmade gifts. Specifically handmade gifts that the former queen of the witches had once made. This is in an attempt to remind the queen of the happiness that she had once felt in her life, rather than the evil and despair that is now in her heart. This season is where it all starts becoming a little more focused on maturing. There's a lot of themes about growing up, finding your own path, making your own choices, and the bonds of friendship. The girls are constantly presented with tough decisions about their lives in this season, and their friendship is tested to the limits. Seeing the characters mature to this point is the most satisfying part of the show, and it's honestly such a journey to go on. Watching these characters grow makes you feel really proud and like you've grown up alongside them. One of the most strong points about Ojamajo Doremi is that not only does it flesh out the main 5 girls, but it also gives life to every single background and side character. Think about the idea of the word sonda when you're walking down the street and you start to think about how everyone around you has a complex life of their own, just like how you do. I think that show deals with that concept really well. The background characters get almost as much development as the main ones, and they all have their own character arcs that span throughout the seasons. For example, a girl called Nagato appears for the first time in season 3, episode 20. This is the overall episode 120 of the show. Upon her first appearance, she's a reclusive girl who doesn't like going to school and often skips school. The reason for her being so reclusive and never going to school is never really explicitly stated. However, the implications are enough for us to come to the conclusion that she has some kind of severe anxiety. Doremi meets her and gradually starts befriending her over the course of the episode she's introduced in, and she tries to encourage her to go back to school. Her first attempt to go back to school results in her just running back home after getting to the gates, but over the episodes you see her slowly return to the classroom. On her first return to school, she does all of her lessons in the nurse's office where she feels more comfortable. But then by the final episode, she's sitting in class with everyone. Everybody also considers her a friend by the end of the season. In her first introduction, her only friend was really Doremi. Another classmate who has a lot going on in their life is Tamaki Reika. She's the mean girl of the class, but she's also very interesting and really complicated. There's a lot more to her than just being mean. Over the progression of the series, we learn that she isn't really mean, she's more neglected by her family. Despite being wealthy, and getting everything that she wants in life, her parents just don't really seem to know how to raise her. She struggles to relate to the children around her and never really understands when she's being cruel or when she's taking things too far. In episode 43 of season 1, she runs away from home. This is an episode that really stood out to me because it's the first time we ever see her get character development. She runs away from home after an argument with her parents and she hides out in an abandoned house. In this abandoned house is her classmate who's also run away from home. She's fallen sick. This is the first time we've seen Reika show any care or compassion for anyone but herself. She looks after her sick classmate and becomes friends with her. It's a shame that this episode has kind of mixed morals about it, because on one hand, the development we get for Reika in this episode is fantastic. However, on the other hand, the overarching message of the story is not that great. Obviously, being a show from 1999, Ojamajo Doremi is going to have a few outdated morals. While for the majority of the stories it's really ahead of its time, it does show its age in places, and this episode is an example of that. The reason Reika has run away from home is because she's overheard her classmates talking about arguing with their parents. And she thinks because her parents never shout at her, get angry or hit her, that they can't love her. The episode ends with Reika's father finding her and giving her a smack around the face for running away from home. Yeah. After he scolds her and hits her, Reika finally realises that her father does love her after all. I really enjoyed the episode until this ending came around. As I previously said, Ojamajo Doremi is a show that's always so incredibly ahead of its time. It always has such strong, wonderful morals. And this is one of the few rare moments where it slips up. I don't really agree with showing the show's young target audience that abusing your child is the way to show that you love them. So I think this was a really bad move by the writers. Thankfully, most of Reika's other character development episodes enforce better morals than this one. One of the most famous examples being episode 14 of Moto, an up and down happy birthday. In this episode, Momoko accidentally invites Reika to her house for her birthday party, and even though Momoko has been trying to befriend Reika in episodes prior to this one, having her over at her house so soon is a bit too much for poor Momoko. Reika still has her usual spoilt girl attitude and keeps being really rude and inconsiderate throughout the party. The girls are able to overlook this for a while, but it goes a bit too far when Reika makes a racist remark about Momoko's best friend, Beth.
この子ね。どうしてその子だと思ったの？黒人の子は、ねえ。
Why? どうして？黒人の子が親友じゃいけないの？
ベスって黒人だったの？
肌の色で人を判断するなんて、玉木さんって最低ね。
Momoko gets really angry at Reika here, and it's made very clear that Reika is the one in the wrong. I admire how ahead of its time this episode is. Obviously, this one would have come out in 2002, and I can't really think of anything else at that time that would have so strongly nailed racism so directly. Like, even nowadays, I feel like a lot of kids' shows that try to tackle racism will do it through some kind of metaphor or allegory, but this show just went straight in there using all of the most forward words and terminology that it could. I thought this was absolutely mind-blowing for like a preschooler's Sunday morning cartoon. Reika is very blatant about her discrimination towards Beth. Again, this is something that kids shows dance around. I think seeing it presented so well like this back in 2002 really makes me wonder why we don't get more shows that tackle the topic so directly. Contextually, this is a really insane episode because of Japan's quite famous racist bias. As everybody probably knows, Japan has quite an issue with things like racism and gay rights and LGBT rights. Even like white foreigners are not really the most welcome over in Japan, and I think tackling it so well in the kids show in such a climate, I'm really shocked that they managed to pull this one off. Arguably one of the most perfect episodes of Ojamajo Doremi happens in the OVA Naisho, episode 12, The Seventh Witch Apprentice, Non-Chan's Secret. Naisho was an OVA released after the run of the show, however it's widely agreed that you should be watching it between seasons 3 and 4 because it actually takes place during Moto. In this episode, Doremi befriends a girl in the hospital named Nozomi, who is revealed to be a cancer patient. Despite her illness, Nozomi stays in high spirits and loves witches. Doremi spends lots of time with Nozomi, playing card games and discussing witchcraft. Nozomi even shows Doremi her sketchbook, filled with her own spells and a design for her own witch outfit. Throughout the course of the episode, we see Nozomi undergoing her cancer treatment and swinging between recovery and suffering. As the girls watch the snow fall together one day from the hospital window, Nozomi reveals she wishes she could be a witch so that she could go and play in the snow. After Nozomi's parents tell Doremi how much happier Nozomi has been since meeting her, Doremi decides to get her friends together and use their magic to make Nozomi into a witch for one night. And Nozomi has fun casting spells and playing with the other girls. After this, Doremi decides to go to the Witch Queen and ask for permission for her to become a permanent witch apprentice. The Queen agrees, and Doremi rushes back to the hospital to tell her. On the way there, Doremi runs into Nozomi's mother in the street, who has to break the news to Doremi that Nozomi's condition had worsened and she'd actually just passed away. There's a truly heartbreaking moment as the two grieve together, and after this moment passes, Doremi asks if the two of them can have a snowball fight together to honour Nozomi's memory, as playing in the snow had been her one dying wish. The tone this episode ends on shows us that grief is a normal part of life, and it should be embraced while also encouraging the viewers to find joy and celebration of life within their grief. This episode was absolutely devastating to watch and had so much emotion and character work packed into the 20-minute runtime. I think the approach they take to tackling the topic of cancer is incredibly mature. And it also shows how much faith the writers of the show have in the audience to understand the weight of the story. This episode is a prime example of Ojamajo Doremi never holding back on its storytelling and treating its audience with absolute maturity and respect. So let's talk about the main cast of characters, because this is what makes the show so special. Doremi. She's a happy, optimistic girl, and she has absolutely won my heart over. She's the self-proclaimed world's most unlucky pretty girl. She has a big heart and goes out of her way to help everyone she meets. She's kind, accepting, determined and curious. And I think she's a really wonderful role model for kids and a really fantastic protagonist. All of these positive traits mean that she is really well liked by everyone. She makes friends really easily. All of her flaws are realistic but not too off-putting to make you dislike her. Doremi is childish and clumsy and can be called troublesome at times. She can also be a bit selfish and impulsive at times, and this gets her into trouble quite often. Another flaw of hers is that she struggles to find anything she can really do well. Watching her deal with these struggles is a large part of her charm and makes her really relatable. Over the course of the series, she becomes less impulsive and begins to think about things more deeply before rushing into them. She even begins questioning what it really means to be a witch or to use magic at all, and if it's the kind of life that she really wants for herself after all of what she's been through. Another issue Doremi has to overcome as she matures is the jealousy that she feels towards her little sister. Initially, at the start of the series, we know Doremi is jealous of all of the attention Pop receives and is insecure about how Pop outshines her. However, as the two work together as apprentices, their bond deepens and they become more comfortable discussing their feelings together. Doremi eventually matures well enough to become a good guide and role model for Pop after all. Hazuki. She's Doremi's oldest childhood friend. She comes from a rich family and her mum is really overbearing and kind of controlling, despite thinking she is always doing the right things for Hazuki. This means Hazuki is constantly filled with self-doubt. She's very sheltered and unable to stand up for herself. She attempts to make her own decisions several times, but then goes back on it when it sees that her makes her mum upset. She's kind of the polar opposite of Doremi. She thinks hard before making any decisions, and she's more quiet and reserved. Despite being rich, she doesn't act spoiled or bratty, unlike Reika. And she's actually very humble and kind. She has a strong sense of justice, and she's kind of like the mum friend of the group. She's also very mature and loves studying. She seems to be really good with little kids and gets along with Pop and the younger children. Being friends with Doremi helps Hazuki come out of her shell, but she still lets her anxiety get the better of her at times. She can be called a bit of a scaredy cat, and she's also kind of insecure about her relationship with her childhood friend, Masaru, who she has feelings for. Over the course of the show, their feelings for each other are addressed and explored more deeply, and Hazuki learns to come to terms with these feelings. She's a very sweet girl and she has a lot of layers to her. Aiko. Aiko was a transfer student from Osaka, and she transfers in quite early into the series. She quickly becomes friends with Doremi and Hazuki and becomes a witch alongside them. She's very sporty and has a fiery personality. She has a short temper and never holds back from speaking her mind. Her parents are divorced and she moved to Misora City, where the show is set, with her dad. She chose her dad over her mum because she saw how helpless her dad was and how much he would need her. This is something I have a lot of issues with. Her dad kind of rarely makes any attempt to better himself as a person and constantly blames all of his problems on either Aiko or her mum. Aiko cooks and cleans for her dad and basically acts as kind of like a replacement housewife to him. Even within the cultural context of Japan, I think this is kind of a really horrible way to be showing a dad treating his child, and the way the show glorifies it at times doesn't really sit right with me. The weight of this expectation on a girl who's only 8 years old is kind of crushing, and behind closed doors we see that it really gets to Aiko. She blames herself a lot for her parents' divorce, even though it wasn't her fault. Her dysfunctional family is something that's handled kind of 50-50 well and badly. There are really good moments, but there are parts that stink so badly I wish they could rewrite them. The good and bad really counter each other, and I can't quite make up my mind how happy I am overall with Aiko's family situation. I don't agree with her mum going back to her dad after the way that he treated her after the divorce and even the time they were together. I get that it was meant to be about second chances and showing people can change, but Aiko's dad is just so foul, I don't agree with it at all. Majorika. I can't talk about the characters without talking about this funny little frog. As I mentioned earlier, she is the witch who owns the Mahodo store where Doremi now works with her friends. Initially, she isn't really nice to the girls and kind of has this resentment towards them, especially Doremi, because she's the reason she's now a frog. Over the progression of the series, we see her warm up to the girls a bit more. She even becomes a bit of a motherly figure towards them. The way she treats them could kind of be perceived as like a family relationship. She's a very proud woman and doesn't like to admit either her feelings or her faults. I think she's really funny. She's short-tempered, she's blunt, she's money-driven, and she has a lot of gag moments. I actually think that she's really cute. She's actually my favourite magical girl mascot ever. Look at her. Pop is Doremi's little sister, and she kind of dips in and out of focus over the series, which is a real shame because as soon as her development really starts going, we kind of just don't see her anymore. Her dynamic with Doremi is always fun to watch, and I think that their relationship is written really realistically. Pop pushes it and tries to act a lot older than she actually is, and it's made very clear by some of her failures that she's not as grown up as she'd like to be. For example, when she sleeps through her witch exams. Around the other girls, she's really two-faced and acts really nice to them while being mean to Doremi behind their backs, and I think this is really funny to watch. Onpu. She's a popular child idol. Before her proper introduction to the show, we hear rumours of her being a genius witch apprentice who's rapidly progressing through the exams. She's very talented and always rises to new challenges that face her. While she seems mature and headstrong on the outside, she actually comes to realise that she needs her friends a lot. And she finds that they inspire her and bring out new sides of herself. Deep beneath the surface, she actually battles her own existential horror and career burnout at the age of 8. She struggles with finding the passion she used to have for her work as an idol, and there's episodes that explore her idea of what drove her to be one in the first place. I think for a girl who's meant to be 8 years old, this is an insane amount of complication and nuance to her character. One of my favourite characters, Momoko. She is tied with Doremi for my favourite character. I love the two of them so much. Watching her overcome the language barrier when she's first introduced and settle into life in Japan is really sweet, and I love seeing her friendship with Beth being so strong that it overcomes the distance between them. Her personality is quite similar to Doremi. There's like one brain cell between the two of them. However, Momoko is not selfish like Doremi is. She's inquisitive and she loves learning new things. She's also outgoing and loves helping people out. She's quite emotional and sensitive and can be hard to calm down once she's upset. Interestingly, she grows up and overcomes language barriers twice in her lifetime. The first is when she moves to America as a really small child, and the second time when she moves back to Japan and meets Doremi. As she's introduced so much later on in the series than the others, we spend less time getting to know her than the other girls, which is really unfortunate because I really love her. However, the development that they do for her makes up for her shorter amount of time, and she's a really lovable character. Hannah. Hannah just spends most of the series as a baby who has very strong magic. When she finally manages to age herself up, she becomes a very outgoing girl who again is quite similar to Doremi. She really idolises and looks up to Doremi and copies her a lot. She struggles a lot with basic things like writing, reading, problem solving, and even social skills because she's obviously never learned any of this because she's like 3 years old. Because of her immaturity, she can come across as kind of bratty and has tantrums whenever things don't go her way. She struggles to fit in at school, but people soon learn to love her. Seki Sensei. I feel like I have to talk about her because she is their teacher, but she's also quite a big role in the show. She's kind of like a mentor and a guide, and for a teacher character, she's really well fleshed out. We see flashes of her personal life. We see her relationships with the other teachers and the kids around her. We see her go one-on-one with her students and go far out of her way to help them with their personal lives. It's really clear that she loves every single one of the students and treasures her job. So what are the overall themes and messages of Ojamajo Doremi? The most obvious one is friendship and family. One of the core themes is reinforcing positive relationships between friends and family. As I mentioned earlier, it doesn't always land too well in cases like Aiko's family and the episode with Reika. But this is obviously only a small minority of cases, and a lot of the episodes showcasing relationships are really beautifully managed. The main relationship is obviously the one of the friendship between the 5 main characters. Their unbreakable bond and their found family connection makes them overcome any hardship. The growth of the love and relationship between Pop and Doremi is also another core relationship in the show, and the understanding shown between families in so many episodes makes up for the kind of stinky ones. Another really important theme of the show is hope and determination. Even just the littlest things in this show, like seeing the characters go through a little bit of development or persevere in learning a new skill, to the bigger picture, like never giving up hope in the face of evil or despair. This is really, really vital to the show. Hope constantly underlies every single message that the show gives out. Even though the show ends on an incredibly heart-wrenching note, the audience is left with a feeling of hope and faith that no matter what, the girls will always be friends and will meet each other again one day. As I previously discussed, morals, social issues, discrimination are a huge touching point in this show. The overarching theme of witches versus humans and the segregation between them can be seen as one big racism allegory, but of course it also tackles racism head on. I also discussed previously how growing up is a big theme in the show, and this is explored through episodes that actually head-on talk about the concept of puberty and teach the young kids what is going to happen in their teen years as they get older. There's a really sweet episode which had me a little bit worried when I first started watching it. I wasn't sure where it was going to go, where one of Doremi's classmates is self-conscious about how fast she's growing compared to the other girls around her, and how she's the only girl who has boobs and has to wear a bra. But this is dealt really maturely, and it's quite realistically written. Magic, of course, is the final theme in the show. It's a theme that kind of goes hand in hand with the idea of growing up and maturing, as the stance that Doremi and her friend have towards magic becomes more mature and nuanced as they do. Doremi goes from being young, naive and obsessed with wanting to use magic to realising that the only reason she wanted magic was to do things that she could actually do herself to begin with anyway, like helping people, finding love and learning new skills. The show ends on her final decision to part ways with using magic, and this is handled so beautifully, and it really wraps up her really complex character arc and signifies how much she's grown as a person. There's no other show that can really compare to Ojamajo Doremi. Heartcatch Precure obviously has a lot of the same staff working on it, and the formula is inspired by Doremi. So if you're craving more after watching the show, I'd totally recommend going and watching that. However, obviously it's not exactly the same. If you like shows that are character driven, have great world building, or you just simply admire children's TV that sticks to its morals and has really strong messages, this is also a series I recommend checking out. I believe Doremi is an absolute staple of magical girl viewing. Anyone who's interested in the genre absolutely needs to see this one. I think Doremi is a really important show for its target audience. Doremi's core audience is obviously preschoolers, But there aren't really any other kids shows that tackle the messages and the themes in Doremi as well as this show does, and no other kids show is as explicit with what it wants to teach kids as Doremi. It's so brilliantly written and so thoughtfully crafted. I've been saying this a lot in the review, but Doremi is such a brave, fantastic show, and it was so ahead of its time. Like, nowadays there is absolutely no competition for it. We need something like Doremi again. There's no legal way of streaming Doremi at the moment. There was that really horrible Crunchyroll April Fool's joke saying that they'd acquired Doremi, and then that was a lie. I think if Doremi was legally available, it would draw in a bigger audience and maybe even reach its actual target audience of kids. But for now, the only way to watch it is unfortunately through pirating, which, you know, I definitely don't encourage. And that concludes my review of Doremi. It's such a beautiful magical show. I think if you haven't seen it, it's something you really need to give a chance, even if you just love animation. I think it's such an important part of animation history, such an important part of anime history, such an important part of magical girl history. It's such an iconic, brilliant show, and I definitely don't see it get enough love. So check out my channel for more magical girl videos, and until next time, goodbye!